Scanning for audio.
Hello and welcome to a Tin Dog podcast. This week I'm talking about Smith 2.06, The Almost People. Now, this episode is being broadcast 1 week later than the UK. So if you've not seen it yet, do yourself a favour, just stop listening to this, save it for a couple of days, and then listen to it after you've seen the story. Saying that, many of you may have already tracked down the episode the way you used to and watched it online or something like that. So either way, it's up to you. Listen to this podcast after you've seen the story. You know, it just makes sense. Right, are we sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin with this.
You're going to have to start explaining some of this to me, Doctor.
What, the birds and the bees? She's having a baby. I needed to see the flesh in its early days. That's why I scanned it. That's why we were there in the first place. I was going to drop you off for fish and chips first, but things happened and there was stuff and shenanigans. It's a beautiful word. Shenanigans.
Before I go on, I just need to say that my voice, as you can hear, is not exactly tip-top condition. I've been away for a few days, and, my voice exactly isn't brilliant. So please forgive me for that, and we'll continue with the review of The Almost People. 1 week ago, because this is a two-parter, I decided to record myself a little message from the past with some information, some theories, some thoughts. So here's a message from me with a slightly better voice. Right, this is me speaking, midweek. The next episode, The Almost People, that's not with us for a few more days. But I've been thinking. You see, me and a lot of the other podcasters used to get preview copies of the Doctor Who stories, but we're not getting the next two. We're not getting The Almost People, and we're not getting A Good Man Goes to War. Now, part of me was thinking that the reason for this is because of, Spoilergate. You know, if enough people out there who are enthusiastic but uncontrolled and haven't signed anything have copies of the disc, we can tell the world what's going to happen, and that'll spoil things, but we're not like that. Universally speaking, the podcasters are remarkably well behaved. We're all members of the Podcasting Alliance, so that can't really be it. They are controlling the amount of pre-releases that go out there, so the chances are it's more likely something happens in these stories that they just don't want people knowing. Now, I have predictions for the next story. The first one's fairly obvious. These are all stuff that was hinted at last time. The shoes, I'm thinking that they're going to be important, so that you can tell the difference between Ganger Doctor and Original Doctor. But of course we all know that Original Doctor is still a duplicate brought about from Amy's memories. Yes, I will stop banging on about that one day. Theory number 2, no one in this story is real. Now, I didn't actually see the coming next on the preview disc when I'd recorded my last podcast. So it wasn't until I watched last week's episode again that I saw the coming next time. Now, I did think that no one was real anyway, but there's a pile of Ganger bodies in one scene that look half-made. So I'm thinking that this has been going on for a long time. Theory number 3, the duplicate Doctor is not, I repeat, is not the Doctor who gets killed in episode 1 of this series. It's a red herring used in this storyline. Because there's a duplicate, it's a red herring deliberately to get people like me and you talking about that sort of thing. But I honestly don't think it's the case. It's not part of the larger narrative at all. It's a nice, disposable red herring. Of course, there's lots of stuff that we still don't know the answer to. The origin of and I'm doing the little rabbit ears thing here, the moss that creates them. I'm thinking it's leftover Sontaran technology from one of their earlier invasions. What would you need acid for? Well, of course you need acid to eat through Dalek casings because of the invasion. Yeah, unlikely. I think everyone's really fixating on why they're mining acid. Acid's probably really useful. It would be lovely if it was something really sinister, like getting rid of all of the Gangers off the island. You know, it's for melting them down. So in fact, they're providing a service for killing everyone else. It's a bit Elitnil and Lintilla from Douglas Adams, and I'm probably reading far, far too much into it. But anyway, these are my theories, recorded midweek before the episode. I now return you to myself, who of course has already seen this episode and can comment in so much more depth. Oh, sorry. My theory was, and that was why I started this whole thing, is that at the end of this episode, something big happens leading into next week's episode, which we're also not being given as a preview disc. So perhaps this isn't a 2-part story, this is a 1.5-part story, and the second part of this 1-part story is something linked with the close of this half season, if you see what I mean. It's like a 1.5-parter. It's a lovely theory, probably won't work, and it's probably nonsense. But either way, I'll get back to you very soon. And now, over to, well, me. So, as you've probably heard, some of those questions were answered, some of them really haven't been, and the idea of it being a split narrative isn't quite true. Only the last, say, 3-4 minutes really changed things. We still don't know where the stuff's come from, and I think that actually is much more important. You see, sometimes when people like me talk about Doctor Who, the best example of this is something like the War Games. It's 10 episodes long, and all anyone ever really seems to talk about is the back end of the last episode, the regeneration sequence. We forget the entire 9.5 episodes of actual fun, because we have to get to the important bit, the elephants in the room, and the bit that everyone seems to be wanting to talk about. I believe because I've stayed off the internet and haven't heard anybody else's podcasts, haven't visited a forum or anything like that, but the bit that I know people will want to talk about is what the BBC class as a game change, which isn't really, if you think about it. It's just the continuing narrative. It's the story arc. Well, one of them. You know, not the one we actually want to know about, which is the glowing regeneration girl. No, it's Amy's pseudo-pregnancy. It's the ganger Amy. It's that she's pregnant, it's eye patch girl, you know, the sort of thing. You've seen it. It was the bit where you went, oh, right, so that makes sense then. Or you had an equally ambivalent reaction. So it's important that we do talk about that. It really is. For me, the reason that it's important we talk about it is because it messes with the moral coding of the entire episode, especially after you've seen Confidential. I know there are now 2 types of ganger. A type 1 ganger is the flesh. Just the flesh, this mossy substance that's grown, the government's worst kept secret, as described in episode 1. However, in episode 2, it seems to be run by a private organisation with a logo akin to the Tyrell Corporation, again taking us back to a lot of people's Blade Runner references, except of course that the name of the company, Morpeth something, for me just rang some bells. For where I'm from, northeast England, if somebody says Morpeth and you instantly think of an ancient insane asylum. But that's just me. The chances of someone from Scotland having the same sort of thoughts, probably not going to come into it. So, getting back to my theories, there are 2 types of ganger. The Mark 1 ganger, which was what this Amy would be, and it is what the flesh would have been before the energy hit. Basically forklift trucks, what everyone just said they were. Then there's the Mark 2 ganger, the sentient, almost human ones. Now they're the ones that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but right now I need to talk about, well, the Aminess, because the moral coding of this show built up saying that these people who'd been given sentience deserved to live, deserved to survive and have their own life, and that's perfectly acceptable. If that's the standpoint the show wants to take, these people aren't monsters, then we go with it. I live with it, it's perfectly fine. But then it changes over. The doctor goes, sorry, no, I think you'll find that I'm rock hard, and I'm just going to use my sonic screwdriver on you, turn you to mush, and then we'll move on. I know that's because Amy is a Mark 1 ganger, but we've spent so long of this episode telling people that they're real people, that it just felt really wrong. Yeah, you've got another case of duplicity, go back to time and space with the 2 Amys. Yeah, now I know these are just avatar people. These are people being run from another... Sorry, can we talk about the range of the equipment here? It's allowed to travel through time and space, sending a signal. It's going to create... it's going to need a lot of energy. Also, this signal can permeate the TARDIS walls. And, of course, there's the important question of when was Amy substituted? Was Amy substituted after the Christmas story, when they were on Earth? Or was she substituted by the silence? It's still raising far too many questions. It's the signal strength thing that confuses me and concerns me. How is she sending from one place to another? Or does it not work like that? Is that the sort of thing we have to ignore for narrative purposes? We're Doctor Who fans. We are used to that sort of thing after all. So, basically we're presented with a lot of questions. Very nice questions, but overall still questions. The eye patch lady, well, her eye patch does look a little metallic, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it was Cyberman technology, but you just don't know. So basically speaking, we're presented with a shed load more questions than answers, which is fine, because really, strictly speaking, it's a 3-parter. Actually, strictly speaking, it's a 7-parter, because part 7 starts in a few more days, where we'll be able to see it, think we have resolution, be presented with a massive cliffhanger that's meant to keep us going for the entire summer, and all it'll do is annoy me. Because I really have come to terms with my dislike of the cliffhanger. I just can't handle the stress. I just want a nice closed narrative. Perhaps it's the old school Doctor Who fan in me, the one who in 1989 or 1986 thought the series had just finished, could collect every single story and then stop. Perhaps an ongoing narrative just isn't for me. I must avoid soap operas too. Look, I've talked enough about that. I mean, I should really talk about the episode itself. For example, they were trying to be people, these gangers, which is very nice, and that was basically the thrust of the story. And that whole business with the ganger Jen falling in the liquid and then putting her eyes around it. She seemed to be embracing her gangerness more than the humanness, which is nice because they are a separate race. But she could turn into a monster, and I'm using the monster in the little rabbit ears sense at the very end, thus showing up all the rest of the gangers who just wanted to get on and be human. And of course, they do need finishing off, like a glaze in an oven, by visiting the TARDIS, thus allowing them to become human. If you were going to keep the fact that you were a duplicate from your son, it's probably best not to be involved in a public inquiry. But again, that's probably just me saying too much. I still think that the acid that they were pumping off the island is actually used in order to rot or dismantle the rest of the gangers around the world. But again, just like War Games, all I can think about is the very end of the storyline. It's not big, it's not clever, because the rest of the story, the rest of the episode, was tremendously well written, tremendously well crafted. Yes, the two doctors, and we have to use that phrase, worked really well. Their interaction was superb. Smith's performance, very, very good. The fact that he needed a body double and a voice double, very, very good. All of it worked. Direction, very, very good. I have no issues with any of these things, simply the surprise. So with that, I know I've rambled far too much. I'll fade away, because there are questions without answers. The disposable red herring second Doctor, well, that's to be expected. The swapping of the shoes, I can pat myself on the back for thinking of that, I guess. I guess not. I don't know. That's fine. But let's go on in a few more days, find out some answers, find out some more things, and then sit back and pat ourselves in the back for having watched the best programme in the world. Right, I'm going to go now, and see you all very, very soon. Be seeing you.
You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.